Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm happy to continue with the workshop. I will try to be short as much as possible since this is the second time the position paper is being presented. But still, my name is Viera Pechancová, based at the Tomas University in Zlin, and I'm chairing the task for Social Sciences and Humanities together with Adam Cooper. I'm quite excited to introduce this cross-cutting topic and cross-cutting task force and our flagship work on the position paper because it is connected to the interplay of technology and society. And since this is quite complex, there are many more questions probably than the answers we might provide. And this little bit reflects also to what was Jens Peters previously saying about the concentration and focus on the carbon footprint. But of course, there are not only environmental impacts and not only carbon footprint and global warming potential indicators, but there are many other issues which we might take into account. So with that in my mind, I had also an example and quite interesting question received during the plenary session in Brussels 2 weeks ago, organized by BIPA and Batteries Europe. What is a good battery and what actually society needs? And with this, while we might search for many potential possible answers for that question, we might find evidence, for example, in set plan. On this graph, you can find quite a blooming interest in the topics such as social ethic or human keywords found in the progress reports of the set plan. So it seems that the interest is there, but well, how to? That's the important thing. So our mission is to strengthen the interdisciplinary approach by setting a dialogue between so-called STEM and SSH disciplines, raise awareness among key players, including the, let's say, battery value chain stakeholders, and use social sciences and humanities methods, and of course engage with the key stakeholders. And also, last but not least, maybe to help formulate the not only TRL level, technology readiness levels, but the application towards society, the societal readiness levels. In general, the main objective of our task force and also the position paper was contribution towards several strategic documents, such as European Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, the Technology Roadmap, and KPI benchmarking activity too. And with that, help the direction or directing towards advancing the design, acceptance, and usability of technologies. The position paper structure, in brief, contains several sections, including the connections to other working groups and task forces of BIPA and Batteries Europe. We provide also some state-of-the-art social sciences and humanities research on batteries. And importantly, we outline framework for integrating social sciences and humanities into Batteries Europe agenda. And last but not least, provide a few case studies, examples, and formulate research gaps, policy implications, and recommendations. With this diagram, I would like to present our approach, which has been inspired by coverage of different scientific disciplines on the horizontal level and life cycle stages on the vertical level, really revealing that battery SSH studies are mostly focused on economic and business aspects, especially the use phase, while sociology and political science are well represented fields like psychology and law are less so, indicating thus potential research gaps. Of course, this is one way how to represent the different cross-linking and overlaps between scientific disciplines and life cycle stages. It might provide some benefits to both researchers and industry, eventually also to some policy making activities. So to sum up the outline SSH framework here, we discovered a focus on economic and social aspects with significant gaps in the transport and distribution stages, which are, however, crucial for sustainability and efficiency of battery supply chains. So on one hand, of course, adopting a life cycle-based approach allows to address different factors, but on the other hand, it has limitations too. So we are fully aware of that. When speaking about research gaps, we formulated a set of different research questions, starting with already mentioned in a slightly different way, how much is battery needed for living a good life? Or what are the constraints or priorities that shape the current design and innovation strategies in the battery sector? And these are just few examples of different subgroups we have formulated in the position paper. And that's why I encourage you to go to the BPA Batteries Europe webpage and download the position paper and read through and maybe get inspired for further research, because these questions are open and definitely not yet completely solved. So main takeaways regarding the position paper outcomes and results. Our work has been quite exploratory in this way because our task force has been initiated around 1 year ago. So we mobilized sort of our sources to formulate the main and important aspects on the SSH in connection or linked to batteries. So that's why the policy recommendations to address the capacity gaps are identified through our preliminary assessment. And a lot of work still needs to be done there. We noted limited integration of SSH in battery research with a primary focus on battery use and mineral extraction, neglecting at some point other life cycle stages, and also the role of EU 13 countries and beyond in battery value chain is still to be explored and identified better and more. So this also represents the graphics on the left side on the slide with geopolitics of energy transformation. Coming to the conclusion from my presentation, I can provide a few examples of EU-funded projects where we tried to integrate some aspects of social sciences and humanities and use some SSH methodologies in those projects. Sorry for switching the slides, such as the twin vector, which is the twinning for development of world-class next-generation batteries, focused on sustainable battery design, energy business models, and sustainability assessments, including social LCA topics, for example, and similarly the SOLID project and SMILES project, where social topics are included as well. So finally, thank you for your attention. And in conclusion, so our work highlights the vital role of social sciences and humanities in research and ensures, hopefully, that it aligns with societal needs and also industrial values. Thank you to all task force members and also the position paper co-authors. And now we can move on to the next part of the session, which is the presentation of the co-chair of the task force, Adam Cooper, the associate professor of engineering policy at the University College London. Briefly, his background is in applied interdisciplinary social science, and his research focuses on engineering policy, both engineering for policy and policy for engineering, which includes developing new field methods for socio-technical research.
Thank you, Viera. Thank you for that kind introduction. And I wonder if I can quickly do a handover of the share screen so that I can pick up the slides from my side. Okay, so I think it's worthwhile reflecting just briefly as I switch over the slides on Viera's presentation and the idea that's presented within them about the research gaps in this space, because the scale and volume, the relative scale and volume of research in the social sciences on batteries versus that in the kind of rest of the research ecosystem is orders of magnitude different. So just briefly on Scopus, the major indexing databases, over 120,000 technical studies on lithium-ion batteries alone, whereas there are maybe 150 into 150 that are kind of mainly on social sciences of batteries. So you can see the scale, the different scales that we're operating at here, and that automatically puts the social sciences a little bit on the back foot when trying to engage with these questions. But so what I want to try and do over the next sort of 10 minutes is answer a kind of question about how we move forward in a way. And I'm going to center that on the idea of the importance of interdisciplinarity, which of course itself kind of begs the question of why we need interdisciplinarity, particularly with the social sciences and humanities in batteries innovation, because of course by saying that it's important, I'm kind of implying that we need it and that you should care. I'm going to build an argument around that in the next sort of 10 minutes, which should hopefully, if you don't already have that motivation within you, hopefully you come away with that strong motivation. But the argument I present was just going to be one of many different kinds of arguments that we could present. So don't see this as just the kind of, single reason. Now, if we step back and just think, as Viera was covering, as we saw earlier on with the sustainability session, the big challenge that we're all here about is about better batteries, in a sense. And it's not just better batteries in a kind of vacuum of kind of a concept of better batteries. It's better batteries for better lives, and whether that's better lives for people working, people trying to undertake industry. The point is we're trying to innovate the batteries in better ways here. And what we know is that betterness, in a sense, is already happening. Battery deployment is scaling rapidly and costs have been falling. Again, as was remarked on the last session, perhaps in a way that's slightly scary, maybe a little bit Wild West. But there is a question about, well, these batteries are getting better, aren't they, in some respects? So what is the problem, in a sense, that integrating social sciences into battery development solves? Why would we sort of, mess with this if it's already going so well? Well, social scientists and maybe hopefully engineers and technologists and economists would all kind of agree that what we might call normal technical innovation has a history of generating wider problems with what we might call locally efficient solutions. So, the standout example historically is probably the internal combustion engine for automobiles. But of course, we see this a lot more generally in plastics and so on. And this is partly why we now have life cycle analysis as a means of trying to get to grips with what those wider problems might be overall. And so we face a kind of moment here with batteries where future opportunities and risks can be kind of managed in different ways. So we have this opportunity to take hold of opportunities, and we have an opportunity and a chance to avoid risks by careful design now, by careful choices about how we go about deploying batteries and designing and manufacturing and so forth. And that carefulness, for my money, is kind of where, in a sense, the role of the social sciences is pretty crucial. So how is it crucial? Well, I want to try and illustrate that now by being a little bit maybe provocative, or at least opening up the idea of what kinds of risks we're facing with regards to good battery deployment, or indeed battery deployment in general. And by leveraging perspectives, concepts, ideas, theories, if you like, from the social sciences to do that, and to try and draw a link between social sciences and batteries, battery innovation directly. So, for instance, we're currently facing in Europe quite a potent political turning point. We're seeing a swing towards what are anti-renewable populist parties. If we just sort of see in France, there's strong push away from renewables, the UK with reform, Germany's AfD, all of these political parties are sort of pushing back on renewable technologies quite specifically. It's very interesting. And also they're kind of leveraging that often alongside arguments around immigration and other kinds of political points that they want to, and they're gaining traction is the issue here. Why is that? So social scientists might point to concepts around a failure to distribute benefits of innovation evenly. So under normal technology innovation process, we often see this kind of uneven distribution of benefits. We might see a concentration of costs or risks piled onto the weakest communities globally, those least able to bear it. And then we also see that potentially contributing to a generating of migration patterns and economic challenges locally. So there's these relationships between choices of supply chain, of materials, of technologies, and how they then fold out with regards to changing patterns in where people move and the kinds of resource accesses that they have. And that, of course, leads to political change, political instability, potentially even. Other kinds of issues can arise from a lack of voice and choice with regards to how life is happening. People feeling like they have no control in their lives is a common refrain within the social sciences would see within a range of different kinds of research, not just in batteries, I mean here. And often we can diagnose that with this idea of being innovated at by technologists, by corporations, by government even, rather than innovated with. And so this is potentially one of the pivotal shifts that we can think about as we move from a normal innovation model into something post-normal, if I can put it in that way. And we can see the kind of reaction to technologies existing, this kind of negative antibody reaction in societies against EVs. We see it against PV, we see it against wind turbines, heat pumps. All of these technologies are being targeted. And so the question is, why should batteries be immune from that? At the moment, batteries are to some extent a little bit under the radar, but as they scale, as they grow in profile, they're likely to face similar challenges. So I do have an example that I can draw from with heat pumps in the UK, but I'm going to skip over that because of the timelines, but happy to pick that up if people are interested in the Q&A after this session. So what is the opportunity that bringing social scientists into the equation opens up? Well, we have this ability to develop this, what is going to be, it's already starting to be a pervasive technology. It's obviously, smaller batteries are in our phones and our computers, but they're also going to be in our cars, in our homes, in our factories, in our businesses, in our streets. They're going to be everywhere. So the choice is how do we develop them that addresses the risks that I've highlighted earlier on. So part of this is about how we design batteries to spread the benefits. Who makes them? Who owns them? How are they owned? How are they controlled? Whose benefit is being built into the business models, the technology design, and so forth? How can we create processes that distribute control, giving choice and voice to a wider range of communities of different types of people, different types of settings? How can we mitigate the costs and risks of batteries, placing them where they can be more easily borne? And this is, of course, an intersection between policy, maybe at a national level, maybe at a transnational level within the EU, and also the technology designs. You know, policy can't change what a technology does if it's already baked into its fundamental design process. So the opportunity for policy to be effective is related to the ways in which particular technologies get built out. So how we get there is it's about, we're seeing this demand for new metrics of good innovation is one way of putting it. And we've seen some illustration of that emerging in the previous sustainability talk today, and this hints around approaches here. And this is going to necessitate less of a focus on what we might call a boxed in technical efficiency standards, such as we see within heat pumps. Around the coefficient of performance of a heat pump is the technical standard, and we'll see also within with batteries as well, of course. And to also include a greater account for wider systems, costs and benefits, and to whom. And this is where the social and societal elements fold in here. Question then is, yes, that's all very well, motherhood and apple pie, we all kind of agree with that. The challenge is, how do we actually operationalize this? Well, the kind of key conceptual word here is this interdisciplinarity I started off with, and that sits across and between the social sciences, the physical sciences, and engineering. We need all of these different classes of expertise to start integrating ideas across these different boundaries. And they need to be done in a very particular kind of way. It can't be just about one particular technical perspective dominating the goal. Again, as I reiterated, this isn't just about the most technically efficient object that is then persuaded to be accepted by people. This is about technology designs and ways of putting them together that meet people's needs, that make them desirable, that make people want to have them. So to speak. And to do this, we need to have a common language across these different disciplinary perspectives. And this is it's often talked about, but my research unpacks a huge array of challenges that sits underneath this. It's not super straightforward. It would be great to have some kind of conceptual Babel fish we can put in our ears. We would be great to have. We need to have integrating frameworks so that we can plug these concepts together and allows an interfacing between not just this kind of interdisciplinary communities of researchers like those who are sat around the table in a way here today, but also those who are more in their standard disciplinary research, so that we can draw from a wider pool of knowledge. And of course, all of this requires a kind of humility and patience from both the social sciences, but also the physical scientists, engineers, because it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of standing back and allowing other ways of knowing to be seen as okay and acceptable and recognizable. And so that's kind of the main argument, but the zinger is here that social scientists also study how to do this work effectively. Where expertise in how groups operate, how ideas translate across settings. It's all part of the resources that are available to physical scientists and engineers in these spaces here. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much, everybody. And hopefully we'll have some great questions to pick up. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Adam. So we can now have a short Q&A session to answer some questions either from the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can point some of the provocative thoughts Adam or myself mentioned. And before maybe we get some first question from the audience, I might ask, what is a good battery for you, Adam? How would you define that?
Yeah. I think that's a tremendous question. I think for me, there is this real tension around being able to make batteries work for people in different sorts of settings. So there's a fundamental benefit of batteries in that their modularity allows for a degree of scalability, which I think we need to make sure we don't lose sight of. But to do that in ways that allow people to have control over the deployment, the ability. At the moment, we have that at very small scale. I can go to the shop and I can plug in batteries, into my remote control for my TV. It's all, self-managed, maintained and so forth. And we need to think about that model at this larger scale, certainly in domestic and maybe factory type levels of settings. I can see some questions coming through now.
Yes, right. Edda, please.
Hi, I'm living in Norway, and here we have a very high adoption rate for EVs. People just accept, or generally people just accept, the next car they get will be EV. There are a few diehards who will not change, but I find this attitude very different. I'm from Ireland. When I go home, I find this attitude is very different. There's some arguments which are genuine on the charging points, but there is a kind of knee-jerk reaction. When we're dealing with, as research community, when we're dealing with people, when we're talking to people, how should we approach them? Because we don't want to be talking over people's heads as such. We want to really directly approach this. But how do you suggest as a community that we address many of the issues they're coming with?
That's a question.
It is a great question.
I know it's quite an extensive question, but I'd like to have some kind of understanding. How do you explain it to the average person in a very logical manner that they may actually see the benefit?
So you're talking about the how do you explain why they should have a battery or why they should have kind of this shift to electrification?
Yeah.
So I think one of my angle on this is that there is a tendency, right, within particularly the technical design and deployment community, the engineering of technologies community, to see the technologies as just goods in their own right. And it's like, well, why wouldn't you want this? This is great. It's a kind of hobbyist talking about their favorite sort of hobby to anybody. And there's a requirement of a kind of empathy with other people to sort of see, well, what's a good life for you? What would make your life better? And then working backwards from this description of their life to work out, okay, and how might a battery and what sort of battery or what sort of electrification or what indeed sort of energy management, depending on, again, the nature way in which you frame the question, can allow this person to achieve something better in their lives. This is something that I've been trying to do with heat pumps. It's a very similar sort of situation. I know in Ireland that also heat pump deployment has probably gone a little bit more advanced maybe than the UK, certainly more support. But it's the same sort of thing. Heat pumps are brilliant. They're amazing, sort of like magic boxes that turn, ambient energy into useful energy in the home. But they're also incredibly complex and sort of hard to. Why should I open up my home, introduce all these risks, spend all this money, and then I'm left with basically the same as I had before, which is some hot water and a warm building, for maybe the same or maybe slightly cheaper on a monthly basis. But I put in an awful lot of effort here. So when one opens up the kind of what alternative technology designs might actually be not the best technically efficient, but might be better, more what I call socially efficient means of deploying. And so that's why that need to sort of step back, empathize, recalibrate what good choices are here to sort of see, well, actually, maybe this approach could be more effective. So rather than holding on to that it has to be this one and how do I persuade people, holding a number of different solutions, a number of different options open, and seeing what might be better fits and why for these different communities. So that's certainly from one angle, at least. I don't know if Viera has things to add on that.
What I can add at this place is that sometimes logical explanations and structured answers just don't help. So sometimes maybe it's in line what Aidan was explaining just shortly before what I stated, that multiple answers and not always just purely based on some logical thinking might help.
Yeah.
But yeah, the policy evidence is very similar also in the Czech Republic in terms of the deployment of photovoltaics. And we know that during the past years, around 2010-11, there was a really misguided policy on PVs. And after that, there was a strong opposition from the public, basically against renewables. And this only changed very, very slowly during last years.
I think you both have a strong point, and particularly with Adam, you're saying talk to the people about their situation. Don't ask them to look at climate change, because they will not necessarily be interested, because they don't see it's affecting them today. Exactly. Or even if they do, they don't necessarily realize it.
Well, they might care, but they've got priorities in their own lives. And the question is, how can they be part of this thing that they perhaps want to be part of, but without exposing themselves to huge risks, both cost, resource, damage to their home, taking on board things that they don't understand. There's when we unpack what it means to take on a technology, we're often opening up quite emotional spaces, I think, and that's that appeal to rationality doesn't necessarily, or logic, is often also a kind of a class, a cultural thing. So people who are trying to do this persuasion, often from university managerial classes, and this is about, it looks good on the bottom line, but actually here's my life, and I'm dealing with a lot of stresses here, and dealing with a lot of, how does this make my life simpler? How does it give me more control? How does it make the future look a little bit safer? And so it's quite different sets of parameters that people are making these judgments on.
Thank you. Thank you for the thoughts about this. I think it's very good to have something in the arsenal so you can actually address this.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much for the questions and the answers. And now we can move on to the panel discussion. So Adam will moderate that session in case of need, of course, with my help. And Adam, would you like to introduce the speakers?
Yes, please. So if we could get Bismark, Taina, and Marc onto the screen. Lovely. Look at that. Perfect timing. It's like we were choreographing ourselves on Teams. That's wonderful. Great. So what I thought we'd do, because where are we now? How long have we got? Roughly 45 minutes or so. We managed to get ourselves back on track, more or less. So yeah, the idea with this, just to introduce this panel session, is to explore this idea of how do we bring the social sciences and STEM perspectives together for batteries, for better battery development. So we have 3 researchers with us today who are going to help explore that question and talk about their own work in this area. So what I thought we might just first of all do is, if I can get yourselves to introduce yourselves briefly. We're going to go Taina, and then we're going to go Bismark, and then we're going to go Marc, just to say a little bit about your background. Obviously, in relation to the STEM social sciences side would be quite important, and then a little bit about the projects that you've been doing. So just briefly, and then we'll kind of go around to look at this question about how you've introduced social sciences into your work, or indeed how, as a social scientist, you've found engaging with the STEM side of things. So Taina.
Yes, thank you, Adam, and thank you, Viera. My name is Taina Rauhala. I'm a research scientist at VTT Technical Research Center of Finland. And my background is really in the STEM field. So I'm a PhD in chemistry, working with batteries since, I would say, 2013. And kind of moving from battery materials development through battery safety research, and now to the development of next generation batteries here at VTT.
Bismark. You okay, Bismark? We can't hear you. Oh.
Bismark, you are sharing the screen probably.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe he wants to support the introduction also on this visual
hello.
board.
Hi.
Yeah. So sorry for the technical problem. So hi, everyone. My name is Bismark. I have a background in energy systems, and I'm currently working as a research scientist at the Institute for Technology Assessment and Systems Analysis, ITAS, within the Karlsruhe Institute for Technology. I am a part of the research team, Research for Sustainable Energy Technologies, and we are actually one of the biggest group in the institute. We work mostly on energy storage systems and more specifically on batteries, conventional and emerging battery technologies. And we also apply different methods for our sustainability assessment. I work mostly on applying social LCA, and currently my work focuses more on finding the potential social impact of this emerging sodium-ion battery in comparison to the well-established lithium-ion battery. So with social LCA, it has to do with more of an analytical approach for social sustainability assessment, where you try to identify, quantify, and consequently also manage risk that comes along with a product, specifically in this case, maybe battery, taking into consideration these different life cycle stages. And with social LCA, it has to also deal with stakeholder involvement, which has to do with sometimes, for example, workers. We would want to know the working conditions for workers for, let's say, within the mining sector, and also are there children that are involved in these mining processes. And then we also have local community. So I might not be working or I might not have my child working in the mines, but the water that is polluted eventually has some consequences on me as a local inhabitant. And so, and then we now enlarge it to the society as a whole, which then becomes mostly a global issue. We also have value chain actors as part of the stakeholder group. We want to know if there's any fair competition among suppliers, etc. So currently, social LCA still is facing challenges, but I believe it is a step towards also bringing closer this social aspect that is usually hidden or have been hidden for quite a long time. And I believe that and overall, it helps also give a better decision-making process when it comes to a more holistic sustainability concept. So yeah,
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bismark. And now Marc. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Adam and Viera. So my name is Marc Ayoub. I'm currently a PhD researcher at the University of Galway in Ireland. My background is more on energy policy. I have also an engineering hat, but the reason why I've been involved in this topic is that we just completed a project, an SAI-funded project around battery policy, and we had a report that's published and co-authored with Dr. Connor Little around the policies that really allow the penetration or deployment of grid-scale batteries in Ireland particularly, but we really had a comparative analysis study comparing 12 countries around the world, including the European countries, which I'll be happy to present during this session. So thanks a lot for having me.
Great stuff. So we've got a panel of two physical scientists, STEM researchers, engaging social sciences as part of the work, and then Marc as a social scientist who's engaging with these STEM issues and STEM challenges using those different methods. So what I'd like to do is just kind of go through and just talk in a little bit more detail. So we'll start again, Taina, then Bismark, and then Marc, to just talk through what approaches are you taking to bring social sciences into your work? How does that appear in your work? And what, maybe talk a little bit potentially about the challenges that you found in that space. Okay, Taina.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So as I mentioned, my work is related to kind of developing new battery technologies, and we, for example, would like to currently improve the sustainability aspect of the kind of battery technologies through, for example, improving the performance, to be able to improve the lifetime and the energy density of the batteries, to be able to store more energy in the batteries. Or we would like to develop materials that would use, instead of critical raw materials, would use more abundant materials, or even materials that are produced from bio-based sources. So of course, this is the kind of technical aspects of the work that we do. And then quite recently, we have started to look more into the social aspects of the battery development. So my teammates here at VTT have made this, or developed this tool that we call a green tool that we use for qualitatively assessing different technologies. We've done test cases with batteries as well as other kind of product categories as well. And our goal for that is to have kind of a holistic but quite qualitative and streamlined assessment of the different technologies that we work with, so that we could understand if we are kind of moving that technology into the right direction or not. And the tool is kind of this spreadsheet type of tool where we have listed different perspectives to look at the batteries, and then kind of different perspectives or different criteria with several different sub-criteria. For example, the use of critical raw materials, or the use of renewable materials or recyclable materials, or how responsible the supply chains for the materials are. And then we kind of do comparisons of the technologies that we develop to the state-of-the-art or state-of-the-art battery technologies, to understand if we are really kind of, from a holistic point of view, understanding if we are moving to the right direction in our development or not. Perhaps the different challenges that we've encountered, I would say, are, first of all, as Adam already mentioned, is how to find the common language between people from different disciplines. So often, even for using the green tool that we have developed, we would like to engage a panel of experts to discuss these topics. So really finding the common language, and perhaps kind of giving up some of the prejudice that people might have for kind of on how difficult it is, for example, to work with people from different backgrounds, which of course I think is very beneficial, and at least for me has been a great learning experience, and taught me a lot. And the other things that come to my mind as kind of challenges or things that we still need to overcome is access to reliable information and data, of course. And then other things would be how to ensure, when we do comparisons or we think about the sustainability aspects, of course, how we select the criteria for what we compare, so that we do fair comparisons and kind of avoid any cherry picking. And then the third one that we've encountered is that sometimes we work with these kind of chicken and egg problems, that we want to understand some aspects before there is that much of, for example, scientific information. So I think kind of thinking about things like that. So for example, for our green tool, we would like to understand the carbon footprint of some of the materials, so that we can kind of compare different material options that we use in the batteries. But then for development stage products, there might not be that much information available yet. So kind of how to work around that issue. I think that would be one of the things as well.
Great, thank you very much. It sounds, is the green tool kind of related to a form of multi-criteria analysis, sort of having these different kinds of categories? Is that the sort of basis for it?
A little bit, yes. It's been built on kind of the principles of eco-design from eco-design directive and how we've selected the different criteria for that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we'll come back to that. Bismark, what about your work and the social life cycle analysis?
Yeah, thank you. So most of us might probably know, the general goal of the SDGs is to improve human well-being, and out of the 17 goals, we have about 14 that is interlinked with social aspect. And as researchers in the battery field, we also know that there is nothing like a green technology. We only try to look for better alternatives. And so in this approach, we try to find, okay, how can we look for, we have a general overview of sustainability, but not concentrating on just the environment or the economics. And that's why we try to integrate the social LCA. And I think one of the challenges that I would say is that social impacts are not, they are not governed by natural laws. They are they stem from human behavioral patterns, socio-economic processes, policies, even capital context when we come in terms of culture, heritage, and all that. So there's a lot of subjectivity as to how much is the standard, and so different people have different standards when they deal with social LCA. And so currently one of another problem that I would say, or challenge I would say, is the lack of database, which my colleague just mentioned. The databases currently are limited. We have Selka, which I use for my work. It's limited in terms of we cannot quantify every social problem that we have, because there are quite a lot of social issues. And within these databases, there are also challenges as to how do we quantify this risk with regards to international standards. And yeah, so I think these are some of the problems or the challenges that I encounter within my work. Yeah.
Thank you, Bismark. I don't know if Viera, because I know you work a lot in this sort of space. One thing that strikes me as somebody who's relatively new to life cycle analysis, but I have colleagues here at UCL who kind of teach it. What it sounds like to me is that there's a tendency to take what we might call a kind of engineering or physical sciences approach to the social. So this idea of creating kind of absolute categories or these concepts, which you then put a number against and put it into a database, as if, a social ill in one context or country is equivalent to a social ill, maybe the same social ill in a different context, and of course there's also scientists kind of going, well, being poor in one country is not the same as being poor in another country. Is that a constant debate in this area?
Yes, definitely. And what I can add to this point is that, yeah, it's a kind of a structured way how to quantify the social impacts. So it's somewhere in the middle between some purely qualitative assessment, even though also social LCA could be built on some qualitative data and qualitative methodologies. And on the other hand, on some way towards more objective data. And this is why we incorporate the data sets from databases such as Psylka or Social Hotspot database. So ideally, for example, during our Twin Vector project webinar, we have invited an expert on social LCA, Professor Sonia Valdivia, and she also highlighted the approach of hybrid or combined way of performing the social LCA, to use the database for maybe initial screening, hotspot screening, and provide, in addition to that, also some qualitative assessment with, being in contact with the stakeholders, with the battery value chain actors.
Right, and Bismark, what sort of practical challenge? I mean, there must be challenges with regards to data. I think it was mentioned before as well, with how do you, it's all very well once you've maybe even, I guess, set up a database, getting the numbers or the estimates to be filled in there must also be a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, most of the challenge has to do with maybe the database, because that is my limitation. Because I remember trying to, when I was presenting my results, they asked me why don't I consider certain indicators in my work, or positive indicators. And out of the 74 social indicators within the SILCA, for example, 74, only one positive indicator that has to do with contribution of the sectors to development or economic development, and it is the only positive indicator. So when I am limited as somebody that is using it for my work to be able to find these other indicators that could also improve the social well-being. So I think that is one of the limitations why defining indicators, and why you use this particular indicators, then you have to make it clear for the audience. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that insight. So we'll switch things around a little bit and go to Marc. And Marc, if you can just talk about the work that you do, and I suppose particularly if you can highlight that relationship between the kind of, I guess, policy and is it kind of regulatory analysis as well, and the technical standards or the technical nature of the objects that we're dealing with, and how much that manifests or is apparent in the research, or how you've managed to be able to bring that in.
Thanks so much, Adam. I'll try to answer those questions by sharing a few slides that might include a bit of what we've done, and also some of the challenges we've noted. So as I said, just to give a bigger picture, this is where the role, to complement your point on the interdisciplinarity of things. This is part of a bigger project that was happening at the University of Limerick, SDAI funded. There was a technical group or a technical aspect of it that complements our work, that was looking at the potential of sodium-ion batteries as well, in addition to the existing, know-how around the lithium-ion. So, and with the goals of the climate goals of Ireland to reach 80% of renewables by 2030, there was a big challenge to really know where can we put or spot grid-scale batteries in particular in this context or in energy scene. So this is where the SSH or our policy work came into this. So we looked at the main research question of what we looked at is how public policy influences the deployment of grid-scale batteries. And we really here looked, of course, at the case study of Ireland in particular, but we integrate or we had lessons from 12 other countries to really see what did the leaders in grid scale batteries did over the years within the international or European context, and how did they come about to really reach those higher penetrations. So on one hand, and this is where the public policy or the SSH entered into play, that we looked at the discussion, if you like, in terms of policy outputs, policy outcomes relationships. So the policy outputs are usually the regulations, the laws, etc., that governments do to really push forward some of the and here we particularly look at the penetration of grid scale batteries. But the policy outcome was the how much countries are installing in terms of batteries, the installed capacity in terms of gigawatt or gigawatt hour potential of each. And so we particularly focused on the actions or inactions done by public authorities, and looked particularly at policy instruments, what allowed this penetration of grid-scale batteries. So when we talk about lithium-ion, there were behind the scene, there were some laws, regulations, subsidies, financial or regulatory aspects that really pushed those lithium-ion forward. So we focused in our study on two main policy instruments, the regulatory policies, and mainly I focus here on the legislative definition of storage in the energy context of each country, the electricity pricing mechanism, the market design, rules and regulations, the administrative permitting as well, aspects of this, in addition to some financial policies that include subsidies, feed-in tariffs, capital assistance, or financial incentives as well, or even some spending on research and development when it comes to this. And the main question here, or what we started looking at, is are there any policy mixes, or can we, for example, can we find a set of existing policy mixes between the regulatory and financial that would lead, for example, to a certain outcome, to a certain policy, let's say, or result, or policy outcome? And if I want to, let's say, and this is the outcome which I mentioned earlier, which is the installed capacity, or N gigawatt or megawatt hour. So just to put things maybe more easily into like this the framework or the design of the study. So those were the battery policy outputs we looked at the left hand side of the screen, mainly the regulatory, financial, and other policies, particularly the research and development policies. And we asked the question how these would allow the penetration of more batteries or to have more outcomes, which is in red on the screen. But we didn't really particularly focused only on this, but we looked at different other policies or different, for example, the renewable energy deployment policies. For example, when climate change goals or a country has some targets for renewables, this will directly and indirectly influence the deployment of batteries. So this is a two-way relationship. We looked as well to non-policy drivers, and in addition to some other technologies, particularly the interconnections or other types of storage, such as hydrogen, that really there's a competition with grid-scale batteries. So we asked all those questions and compared those, or have had an input of also a comparative analysis of 12 other countries to really see what did they do to be leaders or promising markets in terms of storage. And what's the if you want the mix of those between those regulatory and financial policies. And quickly, like what we have found as general observation from this comparative analysis, that the battery penetration or grid scale storage in general is an emerging policy concern and is rapidly developing in different contexts and in different parts of the world. Despite having some policies that have been, for example, put in place a few years back or even recently, the full effect is yet to happen in terms of policy outcomes, maybe in the next few years. So there's a time constraint as well, that some policies or financial or regulatory policies take time to be implemented. The main takeaway of this is that there is no one size fit all, if you want, policy design or let's say policy mix that would lead to a certain output. From our case studies, the 12 case studies, we noticed a great diversity in policy mixes when it comes to BASS and the different policy contexts in which they are formed. So there is no single formula for that. But the main other important aspect is it was nearly impossible to really imagine development of storage in any context around the world, in any country, in the absence of government intervention. So no one could find penetration of grid-scale batteries at any aspect, or even when we talk at the technical aspect of things, in terms of lithium-ion or sodium-ion, it is nearly impossible to see this growing and having a sort of economic feasibility without really the government intervention, so without policies, without SSH entering into this game. Some leaders at this front, or some common markers that we've noticed from the leaders, is that there were early policy starters. So the one leading today the grid-scale battery scene were early starters in terms of policy design. So when we talk, for example, about China, about India, about California in the United States, the UK, particularly here in this area of the world is they have been issuing policies since at least 2011, 2012 until now. So there was a big importance for defining storage in the regulatory, defining batteries within the regulatory scheme in terms of legislations, and also defining the market. Particularly, I'm talking about the ancillary services, capacity markets, spot markets, and these are different depending on each context that to accommodate storage. But in parallel, there was also, in parallel to this great diversity of policy mixes, there was a great diversity of financial supports. So in terms of subsidies, depending on the context, subsidies or feed-in tariffs, etc. But we also noticed some markets, particularly, for example, Greece, Spain, France. So they are starting, or they started to issue some policies in the past 2 to 3 years, a bit more. So the result of these policies are yet to be seen in their energy mix. But we expect those promising markets to be somehow leaders in the coming years. And also some of those leaders were also leading on the research and development, also financing and also policies, particularly the UK, South Korea. So as lessons learned or key takeaways on this SSH role or interdisciplinarity that you've mentioned, Adam, is that public policy are central to batteries, storage, to any type of, if we talk about technical, LCA, or any type of policy storage deployment. Other forms of storage, particularly interconnections, may also serve as requirements on the medium and longer term, but batteries or grid scale batteries matter in the short term. So maybe a cross-cutting thing for all the countries within Europe is we are currently, or these countries are at critical juncture. So what we decide now, or what they issue now in terms of policies, they might matter for the 2030 targets and the climate change targets and pledges for 2030 and beyond. Also, in terms of this aspect, we noticed that there need to be sort of certainty for investors and asset owners to really enter into those markets. So the technology alone is important, of course, but alone it does not happen or does not allow a technology to be integrated into a market without having the certainty in terms of market, financial schemes, etc. So the key things that maybe the SSH could be contributing to this battery discussion is asking those questions when developing storage policy, and mainly the definition of storage, recognizing storage, where does storage stand or sits in the regulatory scheme of each country, what are the targets, scenarios for storage, how much storage do each country need to reach its 2030 targets and beyond. Also, there needs to be some clarity in terms of markets and market designs and financial support. There was a mention early on by colleagues around the planning system, public acceptance, the social aspect of things, because it really plays a big role in this. Also, we need to look, or countries need to look at grid connections. So how battery policy and the grid connections policies compete with each other or complement each other to reach a certain target, and also what opportunities industry allows to or offers when it comes to data centers, renewables. So there are plenty of instruments or aspects of this SSH perspective that need to be integrated into this battery policy discussion or storage discussion, because without it, it is really hard to see some growth in numbers or growth in storage penetration without having supporting policies. So yeah, that's it.